Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. This is our Astro-Tarot forecast of January 2023. We're so excited to start another year with you all. Happy New Year, Susheela. How are you?
I am good. You might hear me with a little bit of a cough. I have this lingering tickle, but aside from that, I feel very optimistic for 2023.
Yeah, I do too. It's definitely a shift. There's an energetic shift. I think as January, February move forward, we're going to begin feeling that. And of course, we'll cover it all. But how are you feeling coming out of December and into January?
I feel like I felt maybe a little overly optimistic.
Uh-huh.
As I said to you offline just before, it feels like we're all excited about the new whatever, the shiny new year. And it's like you wash the floor and you're like, oh, it looks so good. And you walk across and there's something sticky. And you have to go wash it again. There's still something sticky.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, starting with two retrograde planets,
Mm,
um, Mercury and Mars, it's a slow start.
yeah.
It's a slow start. And, we'll get into when the energy starts picking up, but that's not till about the third week of January. And I think that December was a month. It was interesting to see that pivot from Sagittarius to Capricorn energy. And I think we still need to let that Capricorn energy marinate and
Yeah.
see what I think that people really tapped into their observer self. Um,
Mhm.
I notice people notice their behaviors and their MOs, and actually saying, I don't know that I want to continue with this. I don't know that I or at the very least it's like, oh, there it is, there's that thought, there's
Uh-huh.
that thought. And I think that that's a good space to be in. And so to start a new year from that space, I think it's so much more intentional.
Yeah, and I feel like the whole year that we've had, every month, every sign we move through was like, oh, this isn't like a typical Leo. This isn't a typical Libra. This isn't a typical Scorpio, whatever. And Virgo maybe was a little more typical, but that Sagittarius time, I don't recall ever looking forward to that so much in the way that I did. And people did really feel like they walked through, from the goth nightclub into, the tea room in the middle of the afternoon on a bright sunny day. It was like it was a really distinct energy shift of walking through a portal. And then we did another one on the solstice. And then
Mm-hmm.
everybody's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, 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 2023, this is the year. And I mean, we always say that. We always, but it does really feel that way. And then we're so excited and we've left so much baggage behind that everybody feels this like, okay, let's just like get the show on the road. But it's not quite, the show is not quite there. You're lining up to see the show and the lineup goes around the block a few times.
That's such a good point. I love that you pointed out that every season of 2022 really felt like every all of the archetypes of that every sign represents were really seen, for better or worse. And I think we experienced every one of them so vibrantly. That's, at least that's the
Yeah.
vision that's coming to my, like, all of the colors are very vibrant.
Yeah, like a higher octave, like, and it
Yeah.
felt like that with the tarot as well. When I go
Mhm.
through a weekly tarot, card that represents the week, it's like the same card. There's only 78 cards, so you're bound to repeat one at least every 2 years.
Mhm.
It's this other level. There's like some other layer to it.
Mhm. Mhm.
So anyway.
Yeah, no, this is great. So we be we began January with a rather intense aspect, and that is Venus in Capricorn conjunct Pluto in Capricorn. So here's why this is so important. As we know, we've talked about this here. I'm sure you've talked about it, you know, with in your classes. I've definitely talked about it in all of my classes. Capricorn energy is the part of our chart that has absolutely transformed. Wherever Capricorn is in your chart, that part of your life has absolutely transformed for, you know, before 2020, but definitely 2020, 2021, and 2022.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are, this last Capricorn season that it's not the last one. We're obviously going to have more Capricorn seasons, but this one's a turning point. If we recall, last year in 2022, we welcomed 2022 with the Venus retrograde in Capricorn.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So here we are exactly a year later with a Venus in Capricorn, not retrograde. But obviously, Venus is visiting all of the degrees that she went back and forth with over the span of 40 days. In those 40 days last year, Venus made a conjunction to Pluto 3 times. That's a lot. And so think about what happened for you all December 2021 and January 2022, excuse me, particularly in relationships. So here we are, Venus and Capricorn revisiting that sign after having gone through that transformation, coming back to Pluto with a Mercury retrograde in Pluto. Like, remember? You remember last year? Remember where you were? Remember what you learned? And so what I'm noticing, Venus conjunct Pluto, is how are we doing now with things that we feel obsessive about? How are we doing with themes around control? How are we doing with power dynamics? And to be honest, this is what I'm noticing people noticing about themselves. Like, oh, there's me trying to control all over again, and understanding I don't want to operate from that space anymore. So if it feels a little intense, and I think that last week of December may have felt a little intense because of this aspect, please understand that it's kind of like checking in with how you're doing with that part of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I have a new deck called the Intuitive Night Goddess Tarot.
I love that.
And this would be the Knight of Pentacles. And there's this kind of Joan of Arc figure. And so it's this, you know, typically the Knight of Pentacles is a slow, steady, applied energy. But there is this like obsessive component to this. I have to, this is the direction that I'm going. I have to keep applying until I get it, until I go. And then all of a sudden you have to kind of wake up and go, wait a minute, do I still think this thing? Am I just repeating? Like, I started this thing off whenever I started it. At some point you're just trudging along and something's changed. Maybe the environment has changed. Maybe you have this like companion, this bullish kind of energy behind you. So it's just sort of this little notice of like, yes, applying yourself, staying, steadfast to an ideal is all great. But every now and then lift your head up and ask yourself, does this still apply?
Mm-hmm.
And allow yourself to tweak the vision as you're still, it's a very dedicated, it's a very grounded energy. But it can be stubborn. It can also be, blinders on and things like that. So that's what I have for you.
I love that. I love that visual of like the taming of the bull. At least that's what I picked up.
Yeah.
I think that, you mentioned steadfastness. That's very much a Capricornian term, right?
Yeah.
And so it's again, it's in when you're steadfast, you're not necessarily moving quickly.
No.
If anything, you're just moving much more intentionally. And I think that's what the beginning of this year with Mercury retrograde is reminding us, especially in a sign of Capricorn.
Mhm.
But that taming of the bull to me really reminded me of that Venus conjunct Pluto energy, because we have to remember that when two planets are conjunct, it's like an amalgamation of that energy. They bring out everything in each other, right? And so Venus conjunct Pluto is a very, can sometimes feel like an overpowering energy. So it's
Mhm.
about taming that bull with a lot of the resources, the knowledge, and everything that we learned over the last year.
Yeah. Instead of, use that strength, like
Mhm.
not in that way of I'm just going to keep plowing through and sticking to everything. It's like, yes, you can be firm, but you do have to lift your head up every now and then and say, wait a minute, am I on the right landscape? Am I
Mhm.
still, you know,
Mhm.
it's that little bit of warning that's there.
Right. So on January 2nd, which I love this because you and I are recording this on January 2nd, is Mercury retrograde in Capricorn, sextile Neptune and Pisces. This is lovely. I mean, essentially, Mercury retrograde in Capricorn, we are reviewing a lot of, revisiting, reviewing a lot of what's gone on in Capricorn, letting you know steps ahead. The sextile to Neptune in Pisces is creativity and magic and everything that astrology and tarot is. So if
Mhm.
you need an example of Mercury sextile Neptune, what we're doing here is exactly it.
So we have the Eight of Wands, which is wands are creativity, they're fiery, they're passionate, all of those things. And this is a card of information. It's a lot of information coming through. So it can be channeling information, it can be information going out, it can be, just absorbing and getting and receiving and like listening and, doing things like opening a book on a random page and seeing what the message is. I'm like, go to page 222 and read the second paragraph or something like that. You tell yourself ahead of time. So there's a lot of information, but in this deck, it's way more magical looking than in some of the decks. Usually it just looks like arrows flying or, like a volley of arrows or whatever. And this one looks very mystical. It's
Yes,
information coming from some other place. So,
I agree. And that's very much that Neptune and Pisces energy.
yeah.
Neptune and Pisces is, I feel that is the expression of what ethereal is. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And we've got, it's this nighttime sky and there's
Hmm.
this, yeah.
For sure.
Mhm.
And so that particular aspect is available or active, that whole week, that whole first week of January. So anything, I think it's really beautiful energy to create vision boards if you haven't already. You have goals. And Neptune and Pisces is dreaming, believing before you see. Um, just be mindful that with the Mercury retrograde, some of the things may change along the way, and that's okay. On January 3rd, we have Venus leaving the sign of Capricorn and entering the sign of Aquarius, in which it will remain there till January 26th. So, Venus and Aquarius, this is really interesting to me because I think that, first of all, this is the first planet that we have moving into the sign of Aquarius. And the sign of Aquarius is going to be very, very important this year. And the reason for that is that in March, Pluto is going to enter the sign of Aquarius, really ushering us into a new time. It'll be interesting what Pluto and Aquarius brings us. So here we have the first planet moving into Aquarius, giving us a glimpse, activating Aquarius energy. And I find it interesting that it's Venus because Venus is the planet of relationships. Aquarius is the sign of anything that is not traditional, that is outside the box, outside of institutions. I think that Venus in Aquarius through most of January is going to be the first glimpse that we get into how relationships are going to change over this next year. They have to come with a lot of freedom. They're not going to be traditional. It's interesting. I don't know how people feel about that. It's a drastic change. So I'm really curious to see what came up for that.
It's mind-blowing. You know, if people have been watching us all this time, they know that we do not talk about the cards and the dates until we get here.
Yeah.
And I don't know what you're going to say, and you don't know what I'm going to say. And the card that I have, and you know, I decided to use this new deck, and the images are different than other decks. That there is an underlying meaning, obviously, that's similar. But okay, so this is the Hierophant.
Oh,
Really.
wow.
And it's this mermaid, basically, in the water, okay, with the moons. It is typically the card of traditional things. It is typically the card of higher learning and higher spirituality. And in some decks, it's depicted as the Pope, or,
Wow.
you know, it's Jupiter also, which is going to be interesting for the next day. But it's sort of like challenging all of those things, coming out of that energy that we were just in, saying like, wait a minute, I'm plowing along. Shouldn't I be looking up and questioning again something, seeing where I am? Do I need different shoes for this terrain? Like, I'm just going. So this brings us to that place of like, well, what does this mean now in this context? What is this education system? What is this urban planning? What is, you know, whatever it is in an institutional sense or a systemic sense that needs to be shifted or changed or looked at differently or revitalized. There's a lot of going on this month of like rejuvenating, revisioning, reestablish, whatever. It's all happening. And I think too, in a relationship sense, January is pretty big. Like that whole Venus thing and the planets Mars and Mercury going direct, I was going to say unretrograding, going direct, you know, there is that feeling of, wait a minute, we get to do something now in a different way. Like, so how you interact with people, or you're interacting with the same person now in a different way, or you're interacting with a system in a different way, or you're reimagining, well, you know, let's say something like marriage, like maybe it's not the thing itself, but maybe it's how you define it, you know. So that's where we get to with this. And it's just funny to me that there's a lot of Aquarian imagery in this card.
Really?
Yeah.
2 moons? That mermaid is very different looking. Yeah, it's a fascinating,
And
it's a
there's
fascinating card.
yeah, and there's all that water, like
Yeah,
almost like the Aquarius, like the water bearer.
the water bearer. Exactly. Right. Yeah, everything. Look, this is a year of reimagining. One of the things I'm noticing is that people are less reluctant to step into new things. They're still scared, they still have doubts, but they're actually really moving forward. And that's so different from previous years.
Yeah.
And so I think that there is the sense of courage, and that takes us to January 4th with Venus in Aquarius sextile Jupiter and Aries. So on the one hand, the relationship side, which I think is important to touch on. And the reason for that is that, look, I'll give you guys a little bit of a heads up. As of July, the nodes are going to change signs, and they're going to move into the Aries Libra axes of the zodiac, which is the relationship axes of the zodiac. that's going to shift relationships. If 2023 is the year where we're going to notice a significant shift, relationships are going to be one of the first things that come into that. So this is somewhat of a glimpse into that too, because of Jupiter and Aries. And at this point, Jupiter is probably at 1 or 2 degrees of Aries. So it's still at the very beginning of Aries. So Venus in Aquarius, everything that we talked about outside the box, everything that is not traditional, reimagining, and Jupiter in Aries, which is a very free energy. Jupiter expands, Aries is me. What do I need? What do I want? How do I shine? And that's very different. That's very different because we're really going to go from a we to an I. And how do each of us as individuals coexist in a relationship? It's, I don't know if I'm making sense, but it's like, I don't know, we're coming back to us as individuals, because I think there's this understanding of, I need to fulfill my purpose, whatever that is, in order to really be happy with you.
It reminds me of a a phrase in a book by Vandana Shiva, where she says, in order to have a green forest, every tree needs to be green. And I butchered it somehow, but anyway,
Simple.
that's the idea.
Yes.
And so there's the collective and the individual, the collective and the individual, the collective. Yeah. It's not all of that where I don't exist and you're depleted and it's all about everybody else. And It's not the other way where it's like me, and screw everything else. It's that going back, there's I need to improve, I need to focus, I need to go inward, I need to whatever. And then I go and I interact. And so the card that we have is the Six of Swords, which is typically depicted by 3 figures getting on a boat and leaving a situation. It's usually there's a male figure pushing off the shore, and then there's it looks like a little family, and the mother and the child are sitting in the boat, and in this case it's an individual, which is interesting.
Wow.
And she's all dressed up there, and she's sort of sitting at nighttime, kind of taking refuge and looking into the distance, to the pathway ahead of her. And so there's a feeling of still the traditional meaning of escaping something that was maybe detrimental. And maybe had this happened a year ago, you wouldn't recognize that. And so you have skills now where you can stop and pause and go, just like our January 1st card of looking up every now and then and not just sticking with something for this, there's that reassessing every now and then. But there is this feeling of escaping something that could have been much more horrible as we're going forward. So it's like, well, it feels like a struggle, but it's not as bad as it would have been had I not learned all this stuff.
Right. And I love that the traditional expression of that card is the family, right? Because I think I remember what you're talking about. And that's very traditional. You have the mother, the father, the child, right?
Yeah.
And here we have this new card that is depicted in such a different way. And yet the underlying message is still the same.
Yeah.
So interesting. I love that. I just want to point out how many sword cards have we had? 2 or 3 thus far?
Let's see. We've actually only had 1.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the other one was.
Oh, there was one. Okay.
Yeah, but there's things. I mean, they are.
Yeah.
She has this what looks like a sword, and the 8 of Wands and the 6 of Swords. Yeah.
Yeah, that stood out to me because that's only the first week of January. Yeah. So we moved to January 5th, which is the sun in Capricorn, trine Uranus and Taurus. You know, we've had this Earth, whenever the sun is in an Earth sign other than Taurus, of course, the trine to Uranus and Taurus, the trine to Uranus and Taurus. So this is the call to, again, Earth energy represents a lot of tradition. It represents grounding in what we know. But we're moving towards a year where what we know is being redefined and being rebuilt. So the sun in Capricorn, trine Uranus, is we're rebuilding a foundation slowly and steadily, and it has to be outside the box, Uranus. And Taurus, I think that this is energy of less is more. I think it calls to value. How do we create a foundation that, if it feels different, that is really based on our values and not what we thought we should be doing, not what we were told we should be doing, but really coming to the grounding of what things mean to us. I think that this is, yeah, I think that this is really beautiful energy, because we're asking ourselves with that Mercury retrograde, who am I now? What do I need now in my life?
Well, it's called potential.
Oh, wow.
But it's the Fool card.
Mm.
And again, it's so fitting because typically it's like this leap of faith. And it's focusing on letting go of something, even though you're afraid. Just have faith, because what lies beyond that is the thing that you want. In this card, the feeling is more about focusing on the potential. It's like you don't have to take the leap of faith if you're actually focused on the potential of the, how do I, there's this magical thing that's over there. Well, so how do I get it to work? How do I get that wand to work? How do I get that mechanism to open? How do I create this opportunity? How do I, where do I look for the whatever? It's more about that feeling. So it feels a little more practical than just, I'm going to jump off the edge of a cliff and wish, hope for the best kind of thing. It's not that kind of vibe with this card in this deck.
I love that. That's very Earth energy. I think this trine to Uranus reminds us we get to do things differently, but doing things differently doesn't mean that we're just, reckless, or that we're just, like you said, throwing caution to the wind. You can plan it, you can move slowly. It can feel comfortable. Uranus and Taurus is the energy of the nervous system. So we have to be kind to a nervous system, especially when we're moving in a different direction. Now, January 6th, we have the full moon in Cancer at 16 degrees. So I find this really interesting because of what happens the day before, which we just talked about, Sun trine Uranus, and because of what happens the next day. So full moon in Cancer is always the call back home. It's a full moon in its home sign. So that's probably going to be, it's going to bring up some emotions. It's going to bring up some stuff. Full moons represent culminations. They represent endings, the turning point of something. It's not an eclipse, so it should, pass rather softly, I guess. But it's still a full moon in Cancer, and this one matters because if it's about coming back home, what does home mean to you now? Especially after a year like 2022 was, and you're looking forward to a new year, but you're vastly different than who you were a year ago. So this is an important full moon. I think that it really calls us to go within. I would really suggest taking some time for you. How do you feel? What do you need? Allow big emotions or anything to pass by, and how do you hold yourself? It's a beautiful full moon, but I think that it's going to bring up a lot of stuff. And I think it's going to bring up a lot of what we're actually leaving behind. I feel it's going to be a moment where it hits us.
Can we just look at
Oh
for a
gosh.
moment?
Yes.
There is a full moon. It is the card of walking away from something, leaving something behind, and moving into a new phase. There is a blankety blank full moon. And it's cups. Cups are all the water signs. So,
Right.
you know, there is something very illuminating here.
Mhm.
And so there is that, again, that re-envisioning, re-examining, checking in, going like, wait a minute, do I put all my eggs in this basket or do I move some of them over there? I was really interested in this thing. It doesn't feel like it's happening. So, and because Mercury retrograde is still going on, you know, I would say don't walk away from everything if it's like, if it is really important, but it's that time where you begin to like, wait a minute, I need to like maybe pay attention to this and revisit this in a couple of weeks. But there's that feeling of like really looking at things that you're maybe still carrying forward just out of sentimental reasons, or
Mhm.
because you worked at it so much, or because you invested so much time, energy, whatever, might not be going forward with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, like as I said earlier, it's interesting what we have the next day on January 7th, because January 7th, we have what is called the inferior conjunction of Mercury retrograde. That is the sun coming together with Mercury retrograde. It happens every single Mercury retrograde, and it indicates the halfway point of that Mercury retrograde. So here we've had Mercury retrograde since December 29th, and it's finally reaching its midway point. It meets the sun, right? So Mercury is like revisiting, reconsidering all of the things. And here comes the sun to illuminate. And I think that with a full moon and that inferior conjunction, that's a lot. That's a lot of, I don't see it being anything like melodramatic. I do see it being something where we have no other choice but to accept what is, because there's a clarity in Capricorn, like it is what it is. In Cancer, which is the sign directly opposite of Capricorn, I think I might have to move from this. And how do I do that? And it's slow. It's slow. It's not abrupt. I think this is mostly about the initial acceptance of something and the
Mhm.
continuing of the observation of that.
So we have the Nine of Swords. It's very pretty compared to a lot of the depictions of the Nine of Swords. It is a card of anxiety. It is a
Mm.
card of maybe suppressing a lot of stuff during the day and waking up in the night going, what have I done? Why did I just buy that place? Why did I do, oh my God, I didn't pay that bill. Like, oh, I can't believe I said that to so and so. That's why they're not talking to me, or whatever. It's all of that stuff. But in this card, it's there's something really pretty going on at the same time. So it's like,
Mhm.
okay, we get to re-envision even our anxiety at this
Mm.
time. So stuff is coming up because on some level, in some way, it is a thing, it is an issue. So when you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning in a panic, do something different. Get up and go, wait a minute, let me walk around, let me turn all the lights on and walk around and think about this, or let me journal about it, or something else, because something very positive, again, we've got all these flowers here, this dreamy place where we can re-envision that and go like, ask ourselves, like, why am I just sitting here panicking? Did I make the right decision? Did I do the thing? Am I supposed to? Is something I'm not looking at? Maybe I need to write this down. Maybe I need to
Mhm.
read a chapter of that book. Maybe I need, you know, it's that,
Yeah.
it's a much lighter, less intense, less out of control kind
Mhm.
of feeling.
Yeah. And we have to remember, I really love that because we have to remember that this Capricorn season is really about, I've called it really stepping into our observer self. So when we step into our observer self, I think
Mm.
we're still going to be triggered. We're still going to be reactive over certain things. But stepping into the observer self is observing that that is happening. And so instead of being completely defined and become like completely enthralled by it, taken over by it, it's about taking a step back and watching it happen, holding it differently. And again, asking ourselves, do I really want that to continue being my MO? So January 8th is now Mercury direct trine Uranus and Taurus. So this happened once before on December 17th, and it's going to happen again on January 29th. So with the full moon, with the inferior conjunction of, I'm sorry, Mercury is not direct yet. Mercury is still retrograde. That's why that fell off. So Mercury retrograde trine Uranus and Taurus, it's coming after those two big events, the full moon and the inferior conjunction. Uranus and Taurus is outside the box, something different. Uranus represents the future. The story's still unfolding. If it happened once before, this is the second time, and it's going to happen once more at the end of the month. The story's still unfolding. And in true Earth energy, move slowly, move intentionally, and one step at a time.
Mhm. Do you want to mention?
Oh, right. And then
I'll show you the two cards.
Mercury retrograde is at its best right now, truly. So the second aspect of that day, yes, is Venus in Aquarius trine Mars retrograde in Gemini. So here we have, oh, so interesting, so interesting. Here we have the cosmic lovers of the zodiac, Venus and Mars, in air signs, okay? Air loves freedom. You can't hold air. Air moves through things, right? You can't grasp it. Remember what we said about Venus in Aquarius. Redefining relationships. We're redefining a lot of things. We're redefining our relationship to not just people, but everything. Creating a trine to Mars retrograde in Gemini. There are a lot of things that we have been reconsidering. Gemini represents options. It's been retrograde since October 30th. It took us through that very heavy Scorpio season. I mean, this is a call, I feel, to what have we learned, particularly about relationships since October 30th? And how do we feel about things now? So I'm really curious about this.
It's pretty wild. So in this deck, because they are, excuse me, goddesses,
Mhm.
there's no male figures. And the word for king in this deck is called a spirit. So we've got the Spirit of Cups, and there she is with this electric eel and this illumination going on. And then we also have the Nine of Pentacles. So we have, in this case, we have water and earth representing these energies. So the first energy and then the second energy. And having them together is really strange because this is the combination of nurturing, emotional, watery energy, which, like air, you cannot hold it in your hands. And then we've got this grounded, financial, abundant energy of the practical part. And so when you put them together, it's like this little thing in our mind of like, well, in order to have this grow, I need to put something into it, but I can't do it impulsively. But I had an impulse to do it, but that impulse might not be wrong. but I can't do it impulsively. And then you do the same thing then with relationships. I feel compelled to whatever, pour my heart out, tell my truth, blah, blah, blah. And then, so there's this funny little play between like what's very practical and what's very emotional. And somewhere in the middle of that, if you take down one side and you take down the other side, probably there's the intellect somewhere balancing those two things, which would be air, which would be the air part. But it's just they're odd to come together in this, and it feels like an odd energy anyway from what you're saying, that how do we balance those aspects of ourselves in that time? And also the fact that yes, Mercury is still retrograde, so those things that come up at the time, pay attention to them, but they might not be to be acted upon yet.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like delay gratification, or delay the urge to whatever. Make a note of it, but then see if that's still true 2 weeks from now.
Right.
And you might get signs. You might get like, oh yes, this reaffirms this. And like after the 5th time, you're like, okay, I got it. But otherwise you might get other things saying, no, you shouldn't do that.
It's interesting energy. I feel this is where we really kind of have to really take a step back, like get the hands off the wheel if you've been trying to put your hands on the wheel, because Mercury is retrograde in Capricorn. Mercury rules Gemini. Mars is retrograde in Gemini. Mercury retrograde is creating a trine to Uranus in Taurus. Uranus rules Aquarius, where Venus is in the sign. So it's almost like the cosmos saying all of these things that usually don't make sense together are connecting with one another, and believe me, they're going to make sense.
It's like rock, paper, scissors, or rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. So that there's 5 of them, but it's like that. This covers that does this does that does that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting energy. So keep in mind, January 8th is a Sunday. So that's how that week begins. I think that's going to be a week of breakthroughs, and it's going to be like, oh, that's not what I imagined. Okay. So interesting week. Okay, so then on January 10th, we have Venus in Aquarius square the North Node in Taurus. I mean, Venus in Aquarius is doing a lot, okay? A square is a 90-degree angle. It's an aspect of tension that catalyzes change. Venus in Aquarius, we're looking at the future, right? Very futuristic. The North Node in Taurus, it's about redefining, because the North Node is also about growth and evolution in a sign like Taurus, which represents doing the things in the way that we've been used to, because that's what feels comfortable. They're coming together in a square. This is a catalyst for change. Look, yes, this isn't the aspect of the day, but I think this week is going to be an interesting week. I think this week is going to come with a lot of downloads, a lot of messages, a lot of surprises. And again, it's expect the unexpected. Please don't fear it. This doesn't strike me as fearful. This strikes me as you need to let it happen this way.
Wonderful card. This would be the Knight of Wands. And it is a fast moving knight. It is full of information. It is flashy. It is influential. It is shiny and flirty and impulsive. And it also may not be the same 2 weeks from now.
Yep.
And so if this is, you know, it's typically depicted like somebody wooing you and they show you that side of them that will get you, but that's not really who they are. It's an aspect of who they are and it's who they can be, but it's not who they are all the time. And so that energy is like that. Things will show up. And that's also like on the 8th, we have a bit of that energy there as well. Things are not exactly as they are in the broader sense of reality.
Mhm.
And so, yes, it's a great time. This is an action taking card. It's a determined card. There's a fun aspect to it as well, playful, but it's like not to put too much permanence on what happens in that moment. Use it
Mhm.
for that spark of inspiration, for that catalyst, for the whatever, but it's not a long-term thing. And it's not to say that the thing you start is not a long-term thing. It's the how you do it is not long-term.
Mhm.
Ideology behind it might not be long-term, or the people you encounter might not be long-term, but it's that initial, oh, this is amazing, or that then leads you to the thing, you know, the subsequent 12, 15, 20 things, but that first thing might not be the thing. So that's the energy behind this card.
Yeah. Yeah. That sense of impermanence. I think we're going to, I think to an extent we know that, but we've lived in a society, particularly, in the last 30 years, at least astrologically speaking, where
Mhm.
we've been made to believe that we can make things permanent and like lifelong, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Like the house. Like once you buy the house, that's your house forever. Once you're at this career, you're in this career forever. And we realized how that's not the case and never really was. It was just a belief system. And I think that now, I think January, that's why we're moving slowly, because I think there's this call to please understand that impermanence is life. Like that is
Yeah. We change is the way it should be. Things staying the same is not a natural state. In
right.
everything, we age, we, you know, everything we look at, if you think about, you know, actors are supposed to look the same the whole time. And it's like all of a sudden it's like somebody looks old and it's like,
Well,
yes,
yeah.
it's a bad thing, you know, or all of those things, the seasons, the temperature, the climate, the things you eat, you know, how you behave in a week in this season versus that season, they're not supposed to be the same. It's a weird,
Mhm.
fictitious, fabricated pile of BS. And our brains now in this thing are breaking out of it, going, there's something not right about this. Yeah.
Right. Very interesting stuff. I'm curious. I'm really looking forward to that week and seeing what comes up and people being like, what? So interesting.
Mhm.
January 12th, Mars finally moves direct. Finally. Just to give you all some context, I can't remember if I mentioned this before or not, but Mars's usual transit through a sign is 6 weeks. Mars has been in Gemini since August and will continue in Gemini till March. Okay. That's a really long time.
Yeah.
And it's been retrograde from, like I said, October 30th and finally goes direct on January 12th. The Gemini part of your chart has been highlighted, activated. You've changed a lot of what you think. You've realized other options, which is what Gemini represents. Finally, Mars goes direct. To me, I think that Mars retrograde in Gemini has represented the intention behind our actions. Can we have a different outlook? Gemini represents how we perceive the world. So how do you perceive the world now? Now Mars goes direct. It's the first day in a very interesting week.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's the continuation of that energy that we've been talking about. Let it take up some space. Let it fully wake up. It's a good day, but let it fully wake up.
Yeah, and it's like we've been saying, there's that individual, and then there's the collective, and the individual and the collective, the I and the we. So Three of Pentacles. And again, it's an interesting card because there's a lot of purple going on. There's like amethyst and stuff, typically not associated with an earth sign material kind of card. But what's interesting is traditionally the Three of Pentacles is about working in the collective. It's about teamwork. It's a small collective. It's not like the greater, it's not like an entire community. It's a small team. It's that first step outside of the me, and then a partner, and then a third person. It's that kind of idea. And what's interesting is there's only one person in this card again. So it's sort of lining up like, okay, how do I interact with this person? How do I interact with that person? How do I interact with this place? And what is the common thread in there? It's almost like redefining your identity to find a common thread instead of having all the different personas that we used to have in order to, it's like we don't seem collectively as a bunch of individuals, we don't have the time or the interest to keep doing that anymore. It's kind of like, this is who I am intuitively with all of these nice amethysts there. How do I, like, can't everybody just accept that this is the me that I am in that situation, in this place, in that thing, wearing this hat or that hat? That's kind of what we feel here.
I love that. Mars, what you just said reminded me of the fact that Mars is, the first planet of the zodiac. So it represents in a lot of ways our individualism.
Mhm.
And in Gemini, it just did so much. It felt like it kind of took us through a labyrinth only to come back to ourselves.
Yeah.
So that's a really beautiful card for that. So the following day, I like this day. I think is it a Friday? Is it a Friday the 13th? It is. Look at that. Okay. Sun in Capricorn, sextile Neptune in Pisces. Remember, that whole week is funky. It's a funky week. I like this. Sun in Capricorn, Earth energy, sextile Neptune in Pisces. I feel this is a perfect day for meditation. Going to the park and staring at trees. I love doing that. It really calms me just to sit in the grass and just stare at trees. It's something that calms my nervous system, brings me back to myself. Beautiful day to do things that, depending on how that week goes for you, calming the nervous system. So a great day for yoga, great day to just chat with a friend, great day to speak like to your therapist, your coach, your facilitator. It's the calling back to like a lot softer, more feminine energy, which is Capricorn and the water Pisces. I don't know, this feels like a nice tea at the end of a very interesting week.
We have the Ace of Wands, and it's a day of inspiration.
Mhm.
It's usually connected with the third eye and
Mhm.
creativity
Mhm.
and receiving of information this way, not cognitive ability, but like
Mhm.
ideas. Um, it's the start of something, it's the spark of something.
Mhm.
If it's relationship oriented, it can be like the first encounter or the twinkle in somebody's eye when you meet, or that kind of thing. So it can be very passionate also because it comes from somewhere. It's typically not coming from within. This is like something that comes from the outside
Mhm.
that ignites something within you.
Yeah, Sun in Capricorn, very much embodied self. The sun represents the ego, Capricorn represents earth energy, grounded energy, but the sextile to Neptune in Pisces is that ethereal spirit-like quality.
Mhm.
Absolutely beautiful day. January 14th, Mercury in Capricorn creates a trine to the North Node in Taurus. So Mercury is about to be direct in a few days. I think we have a lot more clarity, especially after that week that's ending. The trine to the North Node in Taurus. A few things. North Node, remember, evolutionary point, growth. North Node has been in Taurus for quite some time now, about a year and a half now, perhaps a little bit more. No, about a year and a half. It's intuitively what's coming up is accept and honor how much you've grown. Accept and honor how much you've grown and really begin to make decisions from that space. It's earth energy. There's not much fuss to it. There's just, what is it? What feels like the next, not just logical, but embodied, felt step?
Mhm.
And that feels good. That feels like I get this good feeling of this is what's right for me.
Well, this one in this deck is called the Wayfarer, and it's the lovers, actually. It's number 6. And it's about those choices of, do I go left? Do I go right? Do I do this?
Mhm.
Do I do that? Is it a me? Is it a we? Is it a they? Is it a that? And do I go, okay, option A, option B? There's all of these little choices of finding your way, basically. And there's a lot of that this month, but it's there's that feeling, and it's again, there's like such lightness to it, like the intensity of some of these things, some of these cards traditionally is really I don't even want to say muted, but it's like transmuted in this deck, because it's really again about how you have an overarching plan for your life, the big picture ideas. How you go about learning all those lessons doesn't really matter. If you go left, if you go right, the same lessons with different people in different circumstances will present themselves. If you don't get the lesson, it will repeat over and over again. And so it's kind of reminding you that it doesn't matter all that much if you choose A or B, if you keep the big picture destination in mind. And I don't mean destination where you end up at the end of your life, but for those lessons and things that you want to have and experience and feel, that's doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Mhm. Mhm. I feel that January 13th and 14th, it's a Friday and a Saturday. Those are really good days to take care of yourself,
Mm,
to really come back to yourself. I feel those are great, like regulating the nervous system days. Um, don't spiral. I
mhm.
don't think the energy lends itself for that, but after that week, you might have spiraled a little bit. And these days just remind you exactly what you just said with that last card. Now, January 15th, that's interesting. It's a Venus in Aquarius square Uranus and Taurus. Venus square Uranus can lend itself to, for instance, if there's that initial spark with someone, it's like, like Uranus, it's like it brings you out of yourself. It's something new, it's something refreshing. Um, Beautiful, great. Be mindful that if there is that initial spark, there's a lot more that has to be in place, because a Venus Uranus aspect doesn't lend itself for something of permanence. It is very exciting for, an initial spark. Venus square Uranus, great day to change things up, switch things up. If this reminds me of, for instance, if someone's going like on a first date, that it could be fun. You're doing something that you've never done before in terms of your own creativity, really step outside the box, color outside the lines, use different colors. I don't know. This is fun energy. It's a square, but it's really, if one of your resolutions is to try new things, whatever that means to you, this is the perfect day to do that.
Mhm. We have an amazing card, the Nine of Cups. It's abundance. It's often depicted with, um, something that looks like a dinner party. You know, it, I think too, with this month, there's a lot of reminders about living in the moment, like enjoying that moment for what it is. Whether it's, meeting new people or having a burst of inspiration, or even sitting in fear about something, whatever it is, just be in the present moment and not be too attached to what does this mean in the big picture. Because you get abundance. It doesn't mean that you're going to live, win the lottery and, sit there with $10 million. It could be, but what does abundance mean to you in that moment?
Mhm.
It could be a room full of like really interesting people and you never see them ever again, but
Mhm.
it was enriching and fulfilling and eye-opening and something, or you have a really good meal in a really nice restaurant you've never been to before. That's abundant. It's abundant and it's tasty and it's rich and it's whatever, but it's that kind of feeling. It's not like, it doesn't, try and savor those moments of abundance when and how they occur. And again, not get attached to this permanence and be like, yes, everything changes, everything moves, everything is in a state of flux.
Mhm. Mhm. A few days later, January 18th, we have the sun in Capricorn, ready to leave Capricorn, but before it does, it conjuncts Pluto. Um, and on the same day, we have Mercury going direct. This is powerful. So remember, we started the month January 1st with Venus in conjunction to Pluto. What did that tell us about, relationships? A bit of obsession, a bit of, what is your relationship to wanting to control things? And so here we have almost an entire month full of lessons. And I think one of the greatest lessons is the sense of impermanence. Everything changes. And we come to January 18th, the sun conjunct Pluto, which to me it feels empowering. It feels like an empowering um, energy, because there's nothing more empowering than being grounded in the knowing that you can always come back to yourself, that yourself is a safe space. And the way that it can feel like safe space and grounding is if you cultivate a relationship with that part of yourself,
Mhm.
and the rest of the world can be doing what it's doing. And Mercury going direct in Capricorn, so much Capricorn energy again. It's the realization, the something clicks, oh, this is how I'm moving forward as my empowered self. Remember, a conjunction, the sun and Pluto conjuncting, is the amalgamation of those energies. The sun represents ego, and Pluto represents the transformation that comes from facing the shadow. Think about how much you've done that. You're holding both your light and your shadow.
Mhm.
And Mercury going direct is, yeah, I'm holding both my light and my shadow. I know what those look like, and I have enough space within me to hold both. Um, yeah, go ahead, because this is a powerful day.
We have the universe. I mean, we could just fold these up right now.
Okay.
It's we started off with potential at some point there, and the Fool, and and here we end up with the universe. This is like the maximum potential that you could have. Everything, it's unlimited. And considering the day or few days before with the Nine of Cups, it's that feeling of abundance. And so with the universe here, it's like, yeah, do you remember all those little things? Like you manifested all of that stuff. And then with Mercury's going out with some, a couple of rocks in your shoe kind of feeling, there's those little remnants of going, okay, there's something uncomfortable here while I'm sitting with this wonderful opportunity. Let me take my shoe off and shake it out because there's still something bugging me. And
Mhm.
that's that last little bits of Mercury that we get to shake out and venture out on this, like, we made it, like another one of those we made it kind of feeling. But it's big. I think there's a big opportunity to, and I don't want people to think like, oh, on that day this opportunity shows up. It's putting all the little pieces together where you actually can envision that there is a possibility of getting this done, whatever
Mhm.
it is that you want to do.
Mhm.
Your life purpose, your big ambition, your relationship goals, whatever it is. It's like you actually can, like, all these little pieces do add up to something really cool.
Mhm. I totally agree with that. I feel like the Sun Pluto conjunction is about the recognition of when we face our shadow and we get to know it, and we and we go for the ride. um we're actually creating space.
Mhm.
We're actually creating space. And Mercury going direct, it feels like we're finally, like you said, tapping into this energy of, oh, that is possible. And it feels so different because I think what we're going to realize is no matter how much we've studied, how many affirmations we say, all of the meditation we do, there's something about this Mercury going direct where something clicks to where all of those things finally fully really make sense in a
Mhm.
very genuine way. Yeah. So that begins to mark that turning point of January, I feel. And of course, on January 20th, we have Aquarius season. Um, and so, if you don't mind, I want to touch on Aquarius season. And then the next day, January 21st, we have the new moon in Aquarius.
Mhm.
One of the best new moons of the year. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's at the beginning of the season. To me, this is when the year begins.
Yeah.
Um, it's Aquarius. It's different. It's outside the box. We're ideally comfortable with the sense of change and impermanence, and getting comfortable with that. It's not just about saying, okay, things change. It's about being present with what we have in the understanding that it's not going to remain the same. So why don't we enjoy it while it lasts? Um, so January 20th and 21st, I believe it's a weekend, that new moon creates a sextile to Jupiter in Aries. So it's the sense of new beginnings, expanding in a new way. Aries, the energy of the self. What does this mean to me? How does this help me grow and expand? I feel that this is also fast moving. It's air and fire. Um, so beautiful. I love it.
So we have two major arcana cards, not a little thing happening.
Whoa.
So we have the moon representing the first aspect, which I find interesting because a few weeks back we had that moon, that Aquarius vibe with the Hierophant that was showing up there, which I've never experienced before. And here we have again, it's Aquarius, but it's typically Cancer with this moon card.
Oh
And
wow.
the character there, the light and the dark, we're talking about the shadow self and the other self, the things that are hidden, the things that come to light. And then the next day, the things that come to light, the
Wow.
awakening or the judgment card. And these two things together are big. This is like really fully exploring that shadow side and being like, yeah, I'm actually okay with all of these aspects of myself. They're just different aspects of myself, all merged into one. All those archetypes I am aware of them. They are not unhealthy. I can use them when I need to. I'm not delusional in who I think I am, all that stuff. And then ta-da, we excuse me, there we go. We emerge in this way of, it's a final, you're not actually going to forget it this time.
Mhm.
Like once you've seen it, you're not going to unsee it. So I like that it's called awakening and not judgment in this, but it is like the final judgment. It's like once you've learned what your name is, you don't forget your name. It's like one of those things. Like everybody knows 1+1 is 2. It's not like some obscure big number times table again. What was that? 125 times 67? I don't remember. No, it's something, it just becomes this basic thing where you're like, ah, yeah, can't go backwards. And it's big.
Uh,
It's not a little
yes.
thing having those two together.
You said something right now that I had in mind earlier and forgot. Um, this is that one thing I've noticed in the last year with clients is I want to do something, particularly in dating. That's such a, relationships. It's a massive part of our lives. But I'm afraid that I'm going to go back to my old ways. I'm afraid that I'm going to forget. I'm afraid that I'm going to get lost again, that I'm going to forget myself again. And of course, we understand that. This to me feels like that's no longer going to be a fear. The sense of self-trust doesn't come from completely eradicating these parts of yourself. It's about understanding them, again, creating a relationship with the shadow, seeing what it has to teach you and show you so that it's not this big scary thing. And I think that those cards, this Aquarius season, it's the shift, that turning point of I've got me. I can trust me. I
Yeah.
love that.
And I think too, people have a misconception often that if they've learned a lesson or they know what's coming down the pipeline, whether it's through astrology or tarot or whatever, that they can avoid all the pitfalls. It's not about that. It's not about not having a bumpy road. It's not about encountering people who push our buttons. It's not about not having arguments with people or whatever. You get to a point where you understand now the mechanisms at play. And so when you encounter those things, maybe your thing is to get all riled up and lose yourself and I don't know, maybe now you can enter that and be calm and rational and there's no triggering going on, or you still attract a certain type of person or a certain type of situation, but you notice it right away and you go, you know what, this is actually not for me, but thank you, have a nice day.
Right.
And so it's that thing that we're getting to finally. It's not that
Mhm,
we're going to eradicate all these things from our lives. It's
mhm,
that we have tools, we have learned, we know how to navigate the bumpy roads now.
mhm. Yep. I love that. So on January 22nd, we have Mercury now direct in Capricorn, trine the North Node in Taurus. Again, that evolution, that Mercury has just come out of a retrograde. North Node has always represented growth and evolution beyond the comfort zone, which is Taurus. This, everything we just talked about, in addition to, I feel like the body and the mind aligning, because I think that's been the biggest disconnect. At least that's what I've noticed. And it's really influenced a lot of my work over the last year. Like what
Mhm.
I noticed is, oh, people have all of this knowledge. They know what their behavioral patterns are called. They know their attachment style. They know their love language. They know all of these things appear. But what hasn't happened is that that download hasn't come into their bodies and the nervous system, which is where there's the disconnect of not being able to trust myself. And I don't know why.
Mhm.
I think this is like the continuing of that unfolding of the two meeting.
So we have a beautiful card, which is the King of Pentacles, actually. So it's grounded, flourishing, confident, comfortable, at ease, abundant, practical, pleasant, all of those things.
Mhm.
It's like I was telling people, throughout the fall that we've studied a lot, but in order to make any of that knowledge useful, you need a practical example.
Mm.
That's how you know. And so you get a little pop quiz and you go, oh,
Right,
that's how that unfolds. I didn't, oh, I gotta, oops. And you go back and you study some more.
right.
And we've passed the final exam. And so we are now using the information, which is, what you're saying of like, it hasn't, it's just now integrating into the body.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Um, on January 25th, we have the Sun in Aquarius sextile Jupiter in Aries. Sun sextile Jupiter is the expansion of the self, of the ego. It's fun energy. It's really stepping, it's beautiful energy. As of that new moon, and the 25th is on a Wednesday. So all of this is great energy for new beginnings. So for those that are creators, launching as of that new moon, as of that week, the sun is the expression of your creativity, sextile Jupiter in Aries. It expands. It To me, this was like a fast expansion, a fast moving through something. I think that if anything lagged over the last year, especially over the last 4 months, this is going to be the thing that moves it forward really quickly. I like that. I like that a lot.
So what do we have? It was as if you were reading the definition for this card.
Oh
This,
gosh.
this is the Knight of Swords, and it is fast moving. We have this antelope, and we have a rabbit or a hare running, dashing,
Mhm.
leaping, getting, to the finish line ahead of everyone else. That's what we've got. Finally, yeah, no more studying. I mean, yes, we will be studying, but you get to actually see how fast the car goes at this point.
Yeah. This feels like those quantum leaps type of
Yes.
energy. It's like for so long you were like, when is this going to happen? When is it? I feel like nothing changes. And then all of a sudden, everything.
Moonshot.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. January 27th, we have Venus then enter the sign of Pisces till February 20th. So really interesting. Venus in Pisces, first of all, sweet,
Yep.
sweet, romantic, dreamer. I love Venus in Pisces. It's like sweet that gives you a toothache sweet. Like, I love it. It's so romantic. It's so kind. Um, I love this because I think that with the shift in relationships that we're going to see,
Mm.
I think that Venus in Pisces reminds us that this doesn't mean that we're going to turn into like cold, heartless people in relationships. Venus in Pisces reminds us of the connection of the soul, of relating through from the soul beyond what we see.
Mhm.
And there can still be that romance and that sweetness. It's just going to look a little differently. I think Venus in Pisces is also it's interesting what Venus is doing, because Venus is also going to be the first planet that moves into the sign of Pisces, and Saturn is going to move in Pisces in March for the next 2.5 years. So that's an introduction to that energy a little bit, but we're going to see it. Great energy for creativity, I think.
Yeah,
Venus and Pisces is the dreamer.
I love Venus in Pisces, and I am a Pisces, and my Venus is in Pisces also. And
Yeah.
when I've had interactions with other Venus and Pisces people, it's like intense. It's, in a good way,
Yeah.
So I get this card, which I won't show you yet. And I never do this. So I have all this Venus and Pisces feeling. I never do this, put a card back and go, oh no, that's got to be wrong. Because I have all these lovey-dovey, romantic, whatever feelings with Venus and Pisces.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, no, that's wrong. I put it back in there. Well, it came out again. I was like, okay, wait a minute. Okay, what did I miss here? So I looked carefully. So the card that we have, I'm not even going to show you what it is. I'm just going to look, we're going to just look at this image.
Okay.
So this image,
Yeah.
like forget everything you know about everything. This image, when we look at color, we have the superconscious and the subconscious here, the
Mm,
blue and the gold. This is this divine energy manifesting in our intellectual space.
mhm, mhm.
And then it's like, okay, Venus and Pisces. Yeah. So there's a lot of hurt people who've been going through all these lessons and all of these things. And even if it's not relationship oriented, there's like trauma and pain, and it doesn't matter what it is. It's like everybody's been going through this. And like you say, they've learned all the terminology now. They know what attachment style they have, or this thing led to that thing, whatever. It's the Two of Swords. Like, not what you think of when you think of Venus and Pisces. This is like not looking, this is oscillating between two things. This is typically, traditionally, this is not a traditional deck. Traditionally, it's like not being able to see past something, and you
Mhm,
have to like, well, we have to not look with our eyes
mhm.
on this Venus and Pisces time. You have to go back to the divine,
Yes.
and you have to bring that soul thing. There's a lot of soul stuff happening. And that Venus and Pisces is the beginning of it. Again, it's like reacquainting yourself with, again, it's the theme of like, I and my purpose, me and a partner, me and a collective, me and a bigger collective, our
Mhm.
soul group, our kindred spirits, our soul tribe, whatever you want to call it. It's all of that stuff. And so I was like, oh, okay, now it makes sense. But it came out twice and I shuffled hard. Flew out again. So it was like, no, don't mess with it. That's the only time I ever did that in one of these readings, going, no, that's not right. But it,
Wow.
yes, it
The
is.
the deck was like, I said what I said, Susheela. Did I stutter? I did not.
Exactly.
It's interesting because Venus and Pisces is also about being mindful of not looking through rose-colored glasses,
Mhm.
right? Because of the romance and all of the lovely stuff. To me, there are placements in the zodiac that they ooze something. And
Yeah.
that's Venus and Pisces for me. That's one of those placements for me. Um, I really love this because, like I said, Venus and Pisces is an introduction of what Saturn is going to do. And to me, Saturn is putting structure to spirituality in the most plain, mundane expression. And
Mhm.
so, what that means, I feel, is yes, things are going to change. There's a sense of impermanence. But when we bring spirituality, when we bring spirit into that, it makes absolute sense. Spirit always reminds us of the sense of impermanence. So, yeah, beautiful, beautiful energy. And what a card, because
Yeah.
that's such striking energy for a sign like Pisces.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's opulent. Like, yeah.
Mhm, mhm. I love that. Okay, January 28th, we have the sun in Aquarius square the north node in Taurus. So remember, squares are 90-degree angles. They're aspects of tension. Tension cause action. It's a catalyst for change. This to me is just another reminder of move forward, take the step, send the email, make the call, reach out for the collaboration. This feels to me very action oriented, a call for action. Now, a call for action, definitely releasing the outcome because of Aquarius and the North Node. I feel like this is more of a practice of our courage to trust.
Phenomenal card. And I love the words that you used, because the word that came to my mind as you were talking was alchemy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the magician in this deck. It's called
Yes.
the witch.
Yes.
And so, yeah, you mix up the ingredients, you mix up the potion, and then you go poof, and then it becomes this thing. And that's what we're doing. It takes a little bit of, it's not, we're making a souffle
Mm-hmm.
for the first time kind of thing.
Yeah.
And if you follow the steps, it should work. But there's this piece of like, how the heck is it supposed to get that big? Like, what if it flops? No, I'm gonna do exactly what it says in the prescribed way, and I'm gonna not influence. And there it is.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Mhm.
it's a very beautiful card about manifesting.
Mhm.
And there's a
Yep.
magical element there. It's like there's part faith, there's part practicality, there is part conviction. And yeah, there you
And
have
you toss all those things together in the cauldron, and then, something happens.
something
Um,
magical.
and that's a beautiful card to have on that day. And then especially with Venus and Pisces, now influencing that energy, because Venus and Pisces is the relationship to spirit.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I'll say about this year is, in anything you do, because Saturn represents the doing, the building of structure,
Yeah.
with that Pisces energy is, you have to remember that you have to build from a spirit space. And this is the introduction to that. I love how January really gives us nice intros to what the year is going to, the bigger energies of the year are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So finally, on January 30th, we have two trines. So we have the sun in Aquarius, now trine Mars and Gemini. That's like a little brainiac. Like, I have so many ideas. I want to do all the things, and this is so fun, and this is exciting. A lot of collaboration, a lot of sharing, a lot of moving. I like it. And then we have Mercury um, in Capricorn, trine Uranus and Taurus. So we have air and we have earth. Both sides are connecting to their own thing really easily. There's a
Mm-hmm.
flow. There's a flow. Trines, now here's the thing about trines in the zodiac, they don't make things happen. I like to think of trines as the universe inviting you to take action and work with the energy. Sun in Aquarius, trine Mars, newly direct in Gemini. What options do you have? Like, what are your ideas? What do you feel excited about? What is your inner genius telling you? And then Mercury and Capricorn, trine Uranus and Taurus, earth energy. Hey, if you do it in a way where you take the practical steps, this can actually come to fruition. I love it. I just, this last part of this January, beautiful. I love it.
We have the sun showing up, and we have the page. This is the page of cups. So this is like the beginner's mind, the juvenile, taking away all the cynicism
Mhm.
and the jaded stuff and the
Mhm.
pessimism and all of that. And the sun creates, in the tarot, when the sun shines on something, it's not like causing a drought or, burning up your field. It's whatever the sun shines on in the tarot makes it better. And we get to start fresh here. Like, yeah, there's so much interesting stuff over there. Where I'm going, where I'm looking, I really don't feel compelled to bring all this old crap with me.
Mhm,
So, I like what you say about it's it's creating that place for you to do the things.
mhm,
This is giving you the mindset and this is giving you the environment.
mhm,
And it's so nice. Like it's so sweet and playful and
mhm.
youthful and open with like the power of the sun. Yeah. Ta-da!
This is like I feel that this is the lightest month that we have talked about.
In a long time.
Long,
In
long
a
time.
very long time. Oh my goodness.
um, I love this month.
Yeah.
There's trust it, but really be intentional about connecting. Um, let it guide you, but this is what I love to call meet the universe halfway.
Yeah.
Meet the universe halfway through action, even baby steps, do the research, but really trust the magic. Trust what's always been there. I don't know. It's such a beautiful way to start a new year.
Yeah. And I think, what we said initially was just to sort of alert people to not be, not rush and think everything's going to happen at once. But by the time you reach the end of the month,
Mhm.
it turns out pretty good. And it's,
Yeah.
it's, that feeling of, I didn't have to be impatient because everything was just unfolding so nicely,
Yeah.
pleasantly. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. So
So there
thank
you
you
go.
all. Thank you all so much for joining us, for having joined us all of the last year. I know, I mean, I don't know about you, but I know that I received several messages throughout the year, right?
Mhm,
For
mhm.
our forecasts and what people went through. So we saw it, and I'm really looking forward to doing these this year because it feels like we're going to be talking about different things,
Yeah. Yeah.
different themes. It feels new, but it feels exciting also. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think this year starts off with us getting out of our heads
Mhm,
and getting out of the school portion of life and getting into the field,
mhm,
really. Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, I love it. Well, thanks again, and we will see you all in February.
Mhm.